everybody. You're listening to the Comic Book Bears podcast. I'm Billy Z.
I'm Brian Pittard.
And I'm Steve Morey.
And what we're going to do on this episode is go over right to the spinner rack. No interviews, no waxing poetic about Image in the 90s. Going right to the spinner rack and talking about current comics. So I'm going to spin that, and there's a little bit of an arrow that's going to pick one of the two of you. Ooh, look at it spin, look at it spin. And it picks Brian. Brian, why don't you tell us about a book that you're reading that you're liking?
Oh, man, where do we start? There's so many good comics these days. It's almost overwhelming. I know, I'll pick Mr. Miracle.
Okay.
No, honestly, I really have talked a little bit about this, I think, here and on Flame On, and I feel like I talk too much about it, but it's one of those books that's by an amazing creative team. It's about a character that I really love that's doing the thing that I didn't really expect, but I absolutely can't be happy enough to read every month. It's a monthly book, thank God. I'm actually craving more of those. But so if you're not familiar with Kirby's Fourth World, you don't really have to be. That's the kind of nice thing about this book. You can jump in and know just the basics of Mr. Miracle, who Scott-Free is, what his powers are. I mean, he's kind of a god, so it's like, powers. But what his gimmicks are, who Barda, his wife, is. It helps to know a little bit about the sort of the family, if you will. Orion, his sort of cousin. I guess they're kind of brothers. Like, it's kind of weird.
They're sort of adopted brothers, I guess.
Yeah, stepbrothers.
In the sense that they were part of the treaty. I couldn't think of the word. The treaty between New Genesis and Apocalypse, and the child of Apocalypse, Orion, was sent to live on New Genesis, and vice versa was Scott-Free.
You mean you said Apocalypse, but you meant Darkseid. And
I'm sorry, New Genesis.
Oh, that's what you're going.
Yeah.
So it's helpful to know about all that, but really, at the end of the day, this comic is just about a married couple and sort of, I would posit, some of the middle-aged ennui / what's my point in life. It starts quite with a bang, with Mr. Miracle ostensibly committing suicide, or at least attempting suicide. But from there, after he survives and is actually saved by his wife, it just sort of starts to go sideways. You know how life has these great plans, and you get all excited about this and that, and you're making plans and schedules, and you've got goals, and things are just fancy and happy, and then somebody just throws a fucking wrench into your life and everything changes, and you're like, oh God, what do I do now? And you're having to deal with it. And I think that's part of what Mr. Miracle represents. But it also represents some of the coming to terms with an adult sort of situation, maybe learning how, you're going to have to be a father someday, very soon, or having to take on responsibility that you really never wanted or expected, and then is sort of foisted upon you. It also has to do with relationships, and both the kind of ups and downs, but mostly the sort of mundane aspects of a relationship. The conversations that on its surface are about sort of trivial everyday things, but under the surface have bigger importance to the underlying relationship. So all of this sounds like quite a lot for a comic to take on, but I will tell you the storytelling by Mitch Gerrits and of course the writing by Tom King is really very spectacular and straightforward enough that you really don't have to work too hard, I think, to get out of the book what they're trying to tell. It is abstract at times. It is minimalist at times and sort of reductive. And there's certainly some stuff going on that's not quite been 100% revealed. But at the end of the day, it's still every month a satisfying read. They're up to issue 6. So the first trade, if you will, is probably going to be available soon, depending on how DC is cranking these days. I highly recommend going and getting the issues if you can find them. If you can't, of course, you can go get them digitally. But your LCS hopefully has maybe some left. It has been pretty popular. I know that the team is widely regarded right now as just being on top of their game. And I know at my store it's been a little hard to come by if I wasn't getting a pull. Mm-hmm. But this book is probably, every week, every time it comes out, it's at the top of the stack for me. I just have to read it.
Yeah, that's certainly the case for me as well. Goes right to the top of the stack. I'm not sure if we're at this point going to do a best of 2017 episode, but I think that Tom King has few peers in terms of the best writer of last year between his work on Batman and on this. And you hit a lot of the points that I wanted to make about the book, Brian. At the core of this last issue, number 6, was a conversation that you would likely overhear at a Starbucks between a couple. And it's just this wonderful marriage of the mundane with the fantastic. Though these are epic characters and these characters are involved in this epic war that is ongoing, there's still humanity to the people that exist within this world. And I'm absolutely loving it. And like you said, and like I said, top of the stack each time. How about you, Steve?
Well, see, that's the thing. I haven't read any of this. So.
What?
I know.
Oh.
You know, what's interesting about like DC and me is that I took an extended break from them. I've only just started getting back into reading my original main core pools. But yeah, a lot of DC other than Astro City and their event books. I've just been kind of anything else. I just haven't been reading.
Well, it sounds like you have a potential buy when they do solicit the first trade there.
Which I'm sure they will pretty soon. I think, first 6 issues, clearly the story's already, or not the story, but the probably the first half of the trades, because it's going to be, 12 issues altogether?
12 issues, yeah.
Yep, maxi series.
Yeah, so they'll probably have like the first 6 and then the second 6, or maybe the first 5 and then the second 7.
I would buy this in a heartbeat as a maxi trade for many different people. I've actually tried to pawn this off on a few friends of mine, and one of the best visual scenes I think in the book so far. There's one in the 6th issue where they're kind of Barda and Scott are fighting through some stuff, and that's where that conversation you would overhear at a Starbucks is happening. And so the juxtaposition of those two things is just fantastic. But probably one of my favorite scenes, and I may have talked about this. I know I've talked about it with somebody, but listeners, if I am repeating myself, I am 41 now and I repeat myself. It happens. The scene where I think Barda is comforting Scott and it leads to sexy times.
Yeah.
And there is one, so mostly 9-panel. Tom King loves 9-panel. Big fan of Alan Moore and just loves 9-panel, which why not? And this panel builds. I mean, it's got Barda kind of doing some stuff, but then it has this 9-panel page of Scott free in all his glory, laying there, very Christ-like in his configuration of limbs, but in sexy time. And I believe with the Mr. Miracle mask placed somewhere. I think that's what they did. Like it's almost. So you're not knowing. I don't know. It's got to be one of those shots where Tom King is laughing as he's writing this, because okay, how many DC comics do you know have this kind of scene in it and done just so masterfully by Mitch Gerrits that I just it brought a smile and some mild arousal to myself. It's in my lips. That doesn't make sense.
I have to say my 2 favorite moments so far. One was the unexpected moment where you had Granny Goodness comforting Barda.
Oh, yes.
There's not a lot of writers that could have made that work. Hat tip to Tom King for that, because that blew me away. And then also from the comedic end, Barda telling Light Ray to shut the fuck up when he's complaining about the couch.
Seriously.
All this stuff is in this series. If you haven't checked it out, check it out. Let's move on to Steve. Steve, let's have you tell us about the book that you're reading and enjoying.
Well, we can bounce across to the other of the big 2 and look at Phoenix Resurrection, which finally finished with a nice $5 issue, number 5. For people who've been reading this, it's been mostly weekly. I think they took a week or 2 off. But the 5th book finishes the story where we've been following sort of a Jean Grey in some kind of limbo-ish, not limbo, but limbo-ish sort of realm where she's a waitress and everybody who's died is her friends and neighbors and family. While outside of what appears to be a giant egg, the rest of the X-Men are looking for a way to get in and either stop the Phoenix completely, or at least save Phoenix, or save Jean Grey from becoming the Phoenix again. And I think in the 5th issue, it really, because it's an extended issue, Lineal Yu actually more or less takes over the art again, which he was kind of spotty on the previous 4 issues, just sort of coming and going. There's been a lot of artist step-ins and assistance on this one, but getting him back as more or less the main artist on this was a good call. It's not as uneven, but the story itself is actually pretty interesting. It basically gives Jean the opportunity to finally face the Phoenix and tell her what she wants, and stand up to, I guess, what the Phoenix has wanted all this time. The ending, I think, is a little bit ambiguous, unfortunately, but I'm guessing that's going to be covered in X-Men Red, which I believe starts, is it this week? It definitely starts this month, but hopefully... I've been kind of on the fence about this. I know story-wise, this is part of the Marvel Legacy initiative that they've been pushing out, bringing back a lot of their old classic characters that have either slipped out of favor over the past 5-10 years or were dead, and they want to bring back. I think story-wise, I think they did a pretty good job of bringing back adult Jean Grey. Where they go from here, I'm not entirely sure, because since I've been reading X-Men comics again, which I started up in, I guess, 2011, I've gotten very used to the fact that the Jean Grey that I grew up with is no longer alive. And I've been very happy with young Jean Grey, which I know, is somewhat controversial. But I don't know. I'm not 100% sold on the fact that old Jean Grey is back, and I know that's going to rub some people the wrong way, because I know there are some big fans out there who love adult Jean Grey and have been chomping at the bit, waiting for her to come back. But we'll see, Steve, how she comes back.
I honestly think you're pretty well right about most of that. It isn't necessary, and I would even posit, unless you're really going to do something cool with her coming back, and I just don't know yet, I think this was such a waste. Like 5 issues of not a lot happening, at least in Jean Grey's existence. I mean, it's you could have just brought her back like suddenly, and it probably would have been just as effective. The only thing that was sort of kind of nice in some small ways was playing with the different characters off each other, because pretty much all the X-Men kind of pile on at this point and are trying to help find her or whatever. But until issue 4 and 5, it was just such a slow burn. And I guess in some ways it's reintroducing a character to people who they know of her from different things. But it's just, I don't know. I just was kind of bored. Yeah. And then you read, because it goes right into the young Jean Grey's life in issue 11. After in issue 10, her just suddenly being devoured by the Phoenix and suddenly being off this mortal coil, and then 11 sort of, brings that back around. But it's just, I don't know. I don't get it. I know, admittedly here, I will be very honest and upfront here. I am a Cyclops fan. And to me, because they brought Jean back, old Jean, they had an opportunity, they still do, to bring back old Cyclops, good Cyclops. Not the Cyclops they ended up killing off doing whatever the hell, that whole, what was the thing, when they fought the Inhumans?
Inhumans versus X-Men, or IVX.
Before they did IVX, and they had the... that thing. Yeah. So, before that thing...
like, weird, why did they do this thing? Yes.
Yep. It's all Emma's fault. They tease you. In this issue, they mercilessly tease you. Not once, but twice with Scott, and Scott of a different thing, and then rip that away from you mercilessly. So I'm like, fuck you guys. I don't.
Did you have the X-Men 3 flashback that I did in those pages?
Oh Jesus! Well, at least they showed him, off screen.
Take your glasses off, Scott. Like, I was just like, what the? Oh, come on! Didn't they? This. It was.
I'm okay with that a little bit. It's better than X-Men 3, no question. But here's the thing. I don't even care about X-Men anymore. I literally get the X-Men because my boyfriend Pat reads it, And I will, since I have them on my tablet, every so often I will just plow through and just kind of get caught up. The Young X-Men, I'm actually okay with what they're doing. I think that's fine. X-Men Gold is garbage. And I will say, Phoenix, that whole no, just waste of time, a missed opportunity. I'm sad. I'm very sad that we don't have such good X-Men comics right now. And what they're trying to do, and this plays into it, is they're trying to appeal to all of us old X-Men fans by going, look, it's just like the old days. You've got all these people. You got Jubilee. You got, Kitty. They had a fucking Excalibur reunion in one of the books that was garbage too. Like, I know what they're doing to me, and it's not working, Marvel. It's not working.
Well, I mean, that's the whole problem. They've been trying to, they saw what DC did. Obviously, these things have been in play they've been in planning stages for a couple of years. But with DC and Rebirth, they had such a good success there by bringing back, old continuity and new continuity, meshing it together, bringing back old characters that were much beloved, but, integrating them pretty well, but also pretty quickly. Whereas this, they're really drawing it out. I mean, they've been drawing it out since the end of, oh my God, I just totally forgot the last massive Marvel crossover thing that I didn't bother reading.
Secret Wars 2?
Secret Wars 2, no, it was after that.
Or not Secret Wars.
Secret Invasion?
Secret
Empire.
Civil Wars 2.
Yeah. Yes.
The last big crossover was Secret Empire.
With Evil, Captain America,
yes,
of course, and the Cubic and all that stuff. But, they've been leaving the crumbs to bring all these characters back, including Jean Grey, because, of course, there was that legacy title where young Jean Grey and old Jean Grey got together. Now, you mentioned briefly Jean Grey 11. I have been really enjoying Hopeless's Jean Grey series. I really, I've loved the lead up. I've loved the sort of the journey that she's been on to try and fight against the Phoenix. And of course, the twist at the end of issue 10, where it turns out the Phoenix is like, oh, fuck you, I don't want you. And then kills her. Spoilers. Was great because I had no idea what was going to happen. I knew there was going to be an issue 11, but I had no idea what that would be. Mm-hmm. And reading that, I enjoyed that. I loved that. Phoenix Resurrection, it was kind of neat. Like, oh, look at all these dead characters. Who can you recognize? Picking out the faces and the little in jokes and puns. But
it's X-Men fan catnip, Easter egg bullshit. Like,
well, it
I
is
get
for
it.
$20 is basically what it is.
Right.
If you buy all 5 issues, it's. I think I think the first issue was $5, $4 for 2 through 4, and then $5 again for 5. So you're paying $20 for 5 issues of basically a story that runs in place for the majority of it.
You had mentioned an appearance of Cyclops, and I did read about that. Is this issue number 5? Is this also one of the appearances of Wolverine?
No.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Wolverine is
old man.
Patch. Patch is a character.
But I was talking about the return of Wolverine, which is.
Oh, you mean the after credits sequences?
It's after credits, because I did read the Captain America with that in there, and I know it was in the Spider-Man that I have.
Nope, they've left that alone, I think, to not confuse people too much.
Yeah, it's interesting, and of course, whenever you read multiple X-Men books, you're always kind of scratching your head about continuity and where everything kind of falls in place. At least in this point, where Phoenix Resurrection happens and Jean Grey happens, now we have an idea. And the same thing with X-Men Blue. We kind of were like, okay, they're jumping around through time. Are they going to be back in time? What's going to happen? I think now we kind of have everybody on the same page, or at least in the same time period. But I don't know. I mean, some people may have really enjoyed Phoenix Resurrection. Like you said, it's fan catnip. If you were really hoping for Jean Grey back and you wanted old Jean Grey back, now she's back. Now you're stuck with her, and now we've got a new X-Men title that's going to be coming out that's replacing, Jean Grey and Iceman and a couple other books that I was really enjoying reading. But there you go. There's your Jean Grey for X-Men Red. Hopefully it'll be good. I always have hopes for an X-Men
good writer.
book. Yeah. But Exactly. Yeah. But with I mean, he's doing amazing job on All New Wolverine. But you know, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. For those of you who are happy that Old Jean Grey is back, Old Jean Grey is back. Me, I'm ambivalent on it.
Okay, well, I'm going to switch over back to the other one of the big two for the first book that I'm going to talk about, and that is Superman number 39. There have been a lot of announcements in press this week regarding the plans of Brian Michael Bendis integrating into DC, and we did receive the news that he'll be taking over as the writer of both Action Comics and Superman, and they will be moving from twice monthly status to monthly status for those two titles. So we're now in the wrap-up, I guess, of the Patrick Gleason, Peter Tomasi era of Superman, which has been remarkably rewarding. And issue 39 gave you all the feels that a Superman book could.
How many of the feels?
At least 72.
At least 72 feels. That's
At
good.
least 72 feels.
That's a good number right there.
Yeah. It's a very simple storyline, very simple. Superman is fighting what is actually a group of old Green Lantern villains called the Demolition Team, sorry about that. And as he's fighting them in Metropolis, this is being watched and right outside the window of children who are in a terminally ill ward. He saves the day, but he also talks to some of the children, and he decides he's going to bring them up to the JLA watchtower, so that they can go to the moon and see the Earth from the moon and have a good time. Naturally, Batman is not exactly happy with this development, but they tasked the kids with a scavenger hunt. One of the tasks in the scavenger hunt is to get a selfie with Batman smiling, and one of the kids actually does this, and it's really cute how that takes place. That's all the storyline is Superman taking terminally ill kids to the watchtower. But what you have within those 20 pages is just heartening, and I can't imagine the person who this story doesn't put a smile on their face. I don't want to know them. It really tugged at the heartstrings and wasn't manipulative in doing it. It was just a natural extension of Superman's goodness, and I'm really gonna miss these guys on this particular title. And there are things about Bendis on Superman I'm excited about. I'm excited about him, what he's going to do with the character of Metropolis. I think he's going to be writing a hell of a great version of Lois Lane, but we're losing something in the process. So that's my pick there.
It was great. I love that.
You liked
issue.
it?
Made me smile. The whole thing was, I mean, if the only thing I would say, and this is not a criticism, but I could see people like that had not been reading Superman a while, or maybe I don't know, they're used to different things, and just kind of going, oh, this is too much. This is
it's the Boy Scout. Yeah, no, I can understand that.
But I loved it. It is me. It is Superman to me. It is what I want, not all the time, but I definitely want out of my Superman, and did not ever get in the movie versions, the recent movie versions.
Well, I mean, this is one of those kind of old-fashioned stories where it's a standalone. It shows him not having to fight, some massive world-ending type of disaster that's going to go on for about 5 or 6 issues and crossover with Action Comics and, possibly one of the other titles. But, I have this issue. I haven't read it yet, but it does strike me as one of those breather issues, those breather stories that you do need every once in a while to remind yourself who these characters are. Because, every character who's been around for 80 years, we all kind of know what they are, what they're about, who they're supposed to be. But lately, I would say probably in the past 20 years, you rarely get a chance to actually witness that in a story.
It seems you've been getting that more and more lately, though.
Well,
I can think of at least 3 books from this past month of DC which were standalones.
Well, but that's
New
the thing
Superman was. Yeah, I think you are seeing that again a bit more.
Well, and that's one of the best things about the whole Rebirth initiatives. But now we're in the post-Rebirth period. But I think we're getting a chance to see what makes these characters so, legendary. These characters that we associate with so many particular qualities and, sense of being that we don't always get when we're, going from massive punch up to massive punch up. and 5-issue crossover where everybody and their brother and Wonder Woman's long lost brother is showing up, that kind of thing. So this is nice. It's nice to see, and I'm glad that it was good.
Yep, and I think we should also mention some really good artwork from Barry Kitson in this issue. Really nice stuff. Okay, Brian, tell us about something else you're reading that you're digging.
Let's see. Let's go to, well, we're in the DC frame of mind. Let's do another DC book. I want to talk briefly about Metal.
Okay.
And I'm not going to spoil the latest issue because I know not everybody's caught up. But honestly, I don't even know if I could spoil it if I wanted to. This shit's crazy. Like, I like it because it's like...
It's heavy metal. It's heavy metal. It's over the top, fun. I'm enjoying this series so much.
Fun is... Okay.
And everything's in the mix.
Yes. No, you've got every DC thing I've ever heard of, and then many I haven't or don't recognize, thrown in here into this melange of stuff. But the good guys are gonna win. So I obviously understand that it's pretty dark right now. Like we're in the real thrashing section of the metal, where everything is just going crazy. But there's some returns in the newest issue. Characters we haven't seen in a while. There's some action involving some of our heroes. Some goes well, a lot does not. And we're on issue 5, which I think, 6?
6 issues, yep.
So I'm kind of shocked here because, how do they wrap this up?
I do think that upcoming tie-in, The Wild Hunt, I think that a lot of stuff happens in that too, though.
Well, that's the one where Morrison's coming in to help collaborate a little bit, which makes total sense because this is Morrison sort of cover band sort of in some ways, but in a way that's a little maybe less Morrison-y and just more free for all. It's a great crisis book. I mean, I think we've talked about it a few times, and I definitely am enjoying it more than I'm not. But people ask me well, what's going on in it? What's happening?
It's impossible to describe to a civilian. Really. It really is.
It's the most DC porn book I've ever read, I think, in a long time. Maybe since Crisis on Infinite Earths or something. Just so much going on and so many things, and maybe multiversity, but even that I could kind of explain to people a little succinctly.
I think of Jeff Johns with JSA, and he had a way of pulling in elements from the Shazam verse and then pulling in Legion stuff, and he did it so seamlessly and so neatly. This isn't neat.
No.
This is fragmented, but there's no way it could not be fragmented. I wouldn't want this neat.
No, you know what's really funny about this is that the further we get into it, the more and more it feels like this is what would happen if we went back to 1985 and we redid Crisis on Infinite Earths, but took out the whole Monitor stuff and just because it's got everything. Everybody's in the mix. Everything's being thrown at it. Things like you said, people and ideas we haven't seen since freaking 80s or 70s. Just everything is thrown in there, along with all of these perverted mirror universe versions or dark universe versions of Batman. But I think it's if you could go back and redo the original Crisis on Infinite Earths, but make it insane, this is kind of what you would end up with.
I mean, again, I like it. It loses me easily. There's been a few delays, so that also makes it a little hard to pick up. But no, I mean, it's if you're a DC fan, you're gonna love this book in some way, shape, or form. I mean, it's got a little bit of everything for everyone.
Yeah, and I also, with the announcement that Scott Snyder is taking over Justice League, I think there's going to be a lot of threads from this that fall into that. If there are loose threads come the end of issue 6, I think we'll be seeing those threads tied up fairly quickly. Just speaking of metal and how that's leading into the new age of heroes, has anybody read Damage or The Silencer?
No.
Nope.
Okay. I have them, but I haven't read them.
Remember what we said, Steve, last week about Image books that were mostly splash pages and you could read them in 2 to 3 minutes?
Yeah.
Damage. On the other hand, The Silencer I enjoyed much more than I anticipated. There's a connection to Batman's world. It's a very believable scenario. When you guys have a chance to look at The Silencer, I think you might be pleasantly surprised, because it's not just a full-on action book, though there's plenty of action in it. There's a lot of nuances to the main character, and I totally dug it. Out of the series that they've announced, I think I'm most excited about the Terrifics.
Yeah, that's one.
That one just looks like, crazy fun. The Silencer was a pleasant surprise, I have to say. All right, well, I seized the mic on that one. Steve, tell us about something else you're reading.
Well, I mean, we could just jump right over to the other big DC sort of outside, inside, side-by-side continuity books, Doomsday Clock,
Okay.
because the third issue finally dropped. It's just continuing to be a really riveting story. I like in this one we're firmly in the I guess Earth 1, Earth Prime, whichever, and we had an interesting sort of cameo with the comedian at the end of the last issue, and now we're fully in a Ozymandias comedian rematch, which again, with the dynamic storytelling, with the way that the panels are laid out, so very much like the original Dave Gibbons work, it really does feel like this is more Watchmen. This is more of what I want to see. What's really interesting too is that you get to see more of how the mime and it's Marionette, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the mime and Marionette fight, which I'm just her powers are pretty easy. What she does is pretty easy to figure out. But for him, I'm scratching my head a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's very interesting. As a mime, obviously he doesn't talk, but he also makes gestures and motions of, at one point holding a gun and firing it, but he doesn't actually physically have a gun in his hand, or does he? Obviously, the results are the same. So I'm not really sure exactly what his power set is, because in the Watchmen universe, really nobody had powers except for Dr. Manhattan. So I'm kind of curious if this is something new that we're looking at, or if he's just using sort of sleight of hand or trick of the light. But it is a pretty enjoyable fight scene. I think there's just so much to love here, but it really, really leaves you with wanting a lot more. There's this great sort of plot where the original, is it Johnny Thunder, I think, sitting alone in his, not so much alone, but sitting in the retirement home, waiting for his family to come. And of course they don't come. Now his family, who could that be? It could possibly be the rest of the JSA to come and save him.
And that completely aligns with the 2 appearances he's had since Rebirth.
In Rebirth, which, and again, I know we talked about timeline-wise. If this is in line with Rebirth number 0, then this is actually happening now in modern DC continuity, not in 92.
Mm-hmm.
So we're definitely, I think that, that kind of solidifies that, hey, this is happening right now. There's some other great, subplot within the subplot. You have scenes of a film that's referenced a couple times, and of course the actor Carver Coleman is referenced several more times. And just like the rest of the Doomsday Clock, we end up with sort of back matter in the form of a Hollywood gossip rag.
I could have had 20 pages of that. I love that so much.
And of course, like the other little tidbits in there, like Sergeant Rock shows up, or at least his soldiers show up.
The members of Easy Company.
The
writer of the film was a Golden Age hero named Tarantula.
Exactly.
There's a lot. The other actor that's featured throughout is the father of Rita Farr, who's later a member of the Doom Patrol. There's a lot of crossover.
It's just really cool. It's all like the whole book plays like one giant Easter egg, and it's fun. It's for people who are paying attention, which means I need to obviously go back and reread it a third time to catch all the little things. But it's one of those event comics that I don't want it to end. And probably the most unfortunate thing, or maybe the unfortunate thing, is I bet they're going to sell a lot of trades of this. because people are going to want to read it all in one go, as opposed to this, semi-monthly, which I think they're taking another couple of months off, unfortunately.
Well, what they've done is I don't know if you caught the announcement, they are switching to a bi-monthly status
Yeah.
to have Gary Frank catch up. And, talk
Which
about
I'm
great
fine
work
with.
in this issue. I mean, the fight
Yeah.
scenes, as you had mentioned, with Mime and Marionette, and also the bits with Comedian and Ozymandias. Whoa,
Oh, and Rorschach.
really good. And Rorschach
Yeah, the
and Arkham.
Rorschach. Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
that I'm kind of pissed off at Batman about. Obviously, Rorschach has more reason to be pissed off, but I feel like smacking him because here's a guy who we just had the button, okay? We've had the button. He knows that there's something that's somehow related to this, and yet he just doesn't get it. I don't know. I'm hoping that he's playing a little bit of a game with this, like he's, wont to do, but I'm concerned about how they're portraying Batman at this point. Hopefully, I'm going to be proven wrong. Jeff Johns obviously is not going to, make one of the central figures in this story turn into an idiot. So we'll see.
Brian, anything you want to add about Doomsday Clock?
You guys have covered it. I've been really enjoying this, being a big fan of the Watchmen, but not being too precious about it. This is a great sequel. I mean, it's as bad as good as it can get with Jeff Johns writing. Like, he's just such a great caretaker of the characters in this, and is not doing it in a way that is just a big crazy event. It's very, in some ways it's funny because you got Metal going on, and this Metal is closer to what I would have thought this would have turned into, Superman versus Dr. Manhattan. But what this really is just a excellent sequel to the Watchmen, done through a DC lens and with an effect, I'm sure, on the DC universe at large. So I like it. Art's fantastic. I'm okay with it being not bi-monthly, every other month, because again, so many books. Okay, take your time, no worries. I did hear, Steve, that this is actually supposed to be set in the future of DC, not the present.
Okay, well, we also found that in some of the back matter, Brian,
Yep.
that some of the back matter is dated in the present.
Weird.
So that's why we were interpreting it as being present day DC.
Well,
I
it
think
makes
it's the
sense.
Metropolis things. Yeah.
It makes sense that it's present. Like you wouldn't expect it to be in the future, but I think what I believe the conversation was regarding was, if you consider the rest of the line doing its thing, current DC, this is like tomorrow DC. It's not far in the future, and it'll all sync up, I think, eventually. But it's meant to be almost now, but not quite. So anyway.
I know you guys have books you want to talk about, so there's a couple that I want to talk about, but I'll abbreviate them, and I'm okay with that. Last week we had a series of annuals from DC Comics, since it was a fifth week, and the two in particular I want to talk about. The first one is Detective Comics Annual number 1. The story is Clay, and it presents the revised origin in this current version of the DC Universe of Clayface. Actor Basil Carlo, who's on the cusp of fame and fortune, and a particular event involving something with a connection to his past has an effect on the trajectory of his career, in a very sad event. The origin of Clayface I like the most. Did you guys ever see the animated series version?
It's been a long time.
Feet of Clay, but do you remember that? And there was kind of that gay subtext with the friend of his.
Oh no, I certainly don't remember that.
Okay, watch it again, because he has a very close friend, very close male friend that kind of takes him through the story. It's a very fast-paced story. The writer is James Tynion IV, who is writing the regular Detective Comics series with pencils by Eddie Barrows. What we have with the Flash Annual number 1 is the prelude to the upcoming Flash arc, which is called Flash War. And this is the book for you if your favorite Flash was Wally Wood. It's completely Wally-centric. If people are unaware of where Wally was at where Wally is now post-Rebirth, is he was essentially forgotten, but as people come to make his acquaintance, they begin to remember what Wally was to them and the relationships they had. Some very important little tidbits that happen in this issue. We basically got confirmation that Cyborg was part of the Teen Titans. We've never seen that before. within the Rebirth books. Also, we have a kind of fractured relationship with Barry, and you kind of have to agree with Wally that Barry makes some moves that probably weren't the best way to go. We have some exploration with Wally's relationship with Iris. Iris still doesn't know that Wally's around. She, at this point, would have no memories of him, would have memories of the other Wally, and they even have a nice little discussion about, the two cousins being named Wally, and I know it's confusing, and they just end it there. We have, with the beginning of the Flash War, the reveal who the villain is. We also have a futuristic version of the Rogues, which is had name variations that are not quite Captain Cold or Heatwave. They're pretty interesting because part of the series is set a little bit in the future, and God knows there's so many Flash stories where the future is an element. Written by the regular writer of Flash, Joshua Williamson. It's the prelude to Flash War, and again, as I said, if Wally West is your Flash, you got to go to this book. Let's go over to Brian. Brian, what else do you want to talk about?
Well, just real quick, I do want to make mention that after a bit of a break, Sex Criminals is back. Issue 21 came out recently. And what is interesting and what I actually forgot is that they broke up. John and Susie, I forgot, I completely spaced on this. They broke up in the last issue. And what is nice is 21 jumps forward 6 months. And now we are exploring their independent lives and what they are doing with them. And I just really dig it. I have, some experience dealing with breakups, and I certainly have some experience dealing with seeing your ex at a thing, a mutual party. I don't quite have the same experience that our characters in this book have. It's pretty awesome, but I really was thrilled to see this back out on the shelf, and I definitely missed this book. It is hopefully going to be a little more consistent, I think they said. They've gotten a few in the can. So they will be hopefully producing these a little more often. But, yeah, it's great. You just got to go check it out. Seeing Chip Zdarsky draw again, and been following his writing for a while in different books he's been doing over at Marvel, but seeing his illustration again, just it fills me with joy, almost as much as the zany, I assume, co-plotting, co-writing that is the rest of the book. So if you're a fan of Sex Criminals, great. Check it out. If you're not a fan, you have no idea what I'm talking about. You should just go pick up issue 1 or trade the first. I mean, it's probably one of the more adult comics you'll ever read coming from a big publisher. But in that way, it is so fucking hilarious and irreverent and celebrating a very important part of most of our lives. So you got to check it out.
Stopping time.
Yeah. I gotta say, I really trailed off this book. I think the last issue I bought was 11. And again, the delays they just take you out of the groove.
The delays are bad. I think that some of the plot got a little onerous on them. And I enjoy the book far more when it's just about their relationships and the whole mechanics of everything. I did enjoy meeting the different people who have these powers. That was definitely sort of a fun thing for a while, but still a great book, even if there are certainly issues with its release.
Okay. Well, that's a book from Image. Steve, you got another book that keeps us somewhat within the indie world there?
Well, I do, and it's an interesting one. So, a couple years ago, I think actually it was 2016, Valiant announced a web series, a live-action web series that they were working on called Ninjak versus the Valiant Universe. In this, it was a cross-media introduction or reintroduction to the characters and the world of the Valiant Universe. Not necessarily a reboot, but taking these characters and putting them in a different context, sort of retelling some of their origins a little bit, and their interactions in a more, I would say sort of episodic sort of way, rather than, how they've been building gradually over the past 6 years since they were reintroduced. And it's been delayed quite a bit. They do have, completed casting. They have some some footage, I would think, shot already, and presumably it's going to be released this year. I'm not sure how much they've already filmed. They may have already completed it and just might be in post-production. I have no idea. But part of that push with the web series is that they were going to have a companion comic series that, just like many other sort of adaptations of television series and movies, sets up what you're going to expect to see or what you probably will see in the actual TV show. So Ninjak versus the Valiant Universe has just come out. It's going to be a 6-issue miniseries that introduces sort of the plot of what the web series is going to be. It's very interesting when you have something like this that's, sort of like a finite story that you're trying to introduce people who may not be familiar with who these characters are, what this world is like, and I'm not sure if this is the best way to do it. In it, they sort of created she's in the Ninjak series, the Ninjak world, but the character of Roku, who is very similar to Medusa, down to the fact that her hair is red and it does things on its own, except she's evil. I don't know how she works as an evil villain. We'll see if they expand it a little bit more throughout the miniseries, but in the first issue, it sort of sets up the characters of Ninjak and his support staff over at MI6, brings up Roku, of course, and makes reference to Exo Man of War. And, of course, they're going to bring in a lot of the other characters. Bloodshot's going to make an appearance, of course. Archer and Armstrong, who I'm actually really looking forward to seeing how they interpret it in this comic series. Shadow Man, Eternal Warrior, and a few bits of the Harbinger universe, which is way too complex to do in a 6-issue miniseries for a comic, and definitely for a limited web series. Livewire makes a appearance in this book, really in sort of a vestigial way. Like, there's really no depth there. She's just there to, shoot some lightning out of her fingers and talk to a computer. Again, how I feel about adaptations of screenplays in comic form, it's always hit or miss. This might be more of a miss, but I'm hopeful that now that this is finally coming out in comic form, that we'll actually start seeing this in live action form. It's definitely a different feeling altogether when you see it, in living color moving on a screen. And this is actually, I think, based on the screenplay itself by Aaron Schenke is what it's telling me here. So we'll see. If you're intrigued on what the web series could be, you could pick up Ninjak versus Valiant Universe in comic form, or you could be like the rest of us and patiently wait for the actual web series to drop.
Do you think with the announced sale of Valiant that there may be a rush on getting these existing projects out?
Well, yeah, definitely. I mean, that was the whole point of the sale. DMG purchasing this is specifically set up to make sure that these films, that the media projects, live action, and possibly even animated at some point, that these get to print and that people start seeing these. We know Sony's already working on Bloodshot, and for a fact, and I think Harbinger as well. I don't know anybody's been cast in it yet, or if they've come up with a script, but Bloodshot I know is pretty much a go, but we'll see. I mean, everything's so kind of up in the air right now with the sale. I'm sure they're going to look at sort of what the contracts are out right now, what they might want to try and renegotiate and try changing a little bit, maybe how they release these things. But I hope that this is kind of the final push that's going to ensure that we actually do see a Ninjak versus Valiant Universe series actually become available for people to watch. I know it's out there. Maybe not complete, maybe not through post-production, but it's out there. So hopefully the DMG sale and this is just sort of the first step into actually bringing these characters to life. Hopefully it's good, though. Better than what I've been reading in the first issue.
Okay. Well, we're going to wrap this episode up, and when we wrap an episode of the Comic Book Bears podcast up, we have a segment that we call the Woofs of the Week segment, where we spotlight anything, something that might be a film or a comic book or a TV show, charitable initiative, anything under the sun that we think you, fair listener, may be interested in sampling. I'm going to go over to Bryan first. Bryan, what is your Woof of the Week?
So a friend of mine, Brandon, he has a drag race fantasy league that is called Drag Race Beat. He has been doing it for the past at least one season, I maybe two. And I worked with him, got him a website, and we built a little system. So anyone out there watching All Stars Season 3, which I know not every bear or every comic book reader loves Drag Race. It's a kind of contentious thing. But if you are watching Season 3, or All Stars Season 3, I guess, All Stars 3, if you go to dragracebeat.com, you can go on there and pick your favorites and rank the queens according to, tops to bottoms, and then submit them, see how you do, play against your friends. It's been a lot of fun this season. I definitely think that it's an interesting season of All-Stars, and I'm excited to every week check in and see how the different players are doing, who's winning, who's doing well, and who people thought their favorite queen was. So if you're a RuPaul fan, you like the Drag Race, you want to play along, go to dragracebeat.com, check it out, and let us know that you heard about us on Comic Book Bears.
Let's go over to Steve. Steve, what is your Woof of the Week?
My Woof of the Week is the new TV series from Netflix called Altered Carbon. It dropped completely, I want to say the first Friday in February, so all of the episodes are available online right now. This, I think probably the quickest pitch I can give you is that it's like Blade Runner, the TV series, but 500 years beyond Blade Runner. Really unique, interesting premise about people being implanted with stacks that store their memories and their consciousness, so that when they die, they can have their stacks implanted in a new body or a new sleeve, which kind of raises interesting questions about gender, identity, death, actual eternal life being possible, but also plays with a lot of politics. There's a lot of rich versus poor, class warfare, poverty and violence sort of in the lower classes, as well as the kind of violent excesses of the upper classes. But the show itself is beautifully produced, has some wonderful characters, wonderful acting, and a really unique. My favorite character actually is a hotel. And for those of you who have actually started watching this show, you'll know what I'm talking about. But I never thought I would really enjoy a hotel as a main supporting cast member. But they do a really great job here. I haven't read the original books by Richard Morgan that these are based on, and I'm sure that there's plenty of differences. So for those of you who've read the books, I'm sure that you're probably going to see a lot that you might get angry about because they're not exactly the same. But if you look at this show on its own, it is fantastic. By the way, there's also lots of nudity too, including James Purefoy, who is Pride and Prejudice's Mr. Darcy from the remake in the late 90s, early 2000s with Keira Knightley. You get to see his swinging schlong. So there you go. Lots of butts as well. So if you're into that. Lots of nudity. Enjoy it for the nudity.
Okay. Well, my Woof of the Week is a film, and it's also a comic book related film. And the film I'm talking about is Rude Dude. The Rude Dude of the title is Steve Rude, the artist best known for Nexus, but he's also done work for DC and for Marvel. And it's a very frank documentary. Doesn't just go into his history as an artist, but also the problems that he has encountered as a manic depressive. The film was shot in 2009 through 2011. It has a copyright date of 2014. He's since had some problems with the law and some financial problems, but he's also been getting more consistent work, at least with DC, with the various Future Quest projects. Over the next week or so, it's going to be free on YouTube, and it's also going to be free on snagfilms.com. The print that's on YouTube seems to be of a bit higher quality than Snag Films from what I've seen, so I would go over to YouTube to do that. The film has interviews with other creators and very frank interviews with other creators, including Alex Ross and Paul Pope and Mike Richardson of Dark Horse and Neil Adams. Some really interesting stuff, and the what seems to be this unfortunate collision that happens to many creative people with depression. And you feel for the guy, but also you can see that, man, he must be hell to live with. So really interesting film, Rude Dude, on the platforms that I mentioned. Well, that's it for this episode of the Comic Book Bears. If you want to listen to our episodes, you can go to iTunes or to Stitcher Radio and download and listen through those platforms. If you want to reach out to us via email, you can do so by writing something to comicbookbears@gmail.com. You can find us on the Twitter and the Tumblr and the Instagram as Comic Book Bears, and you can find us on the Facebook as Comic Book Bears Podcast. So until next time, I'm Billy Z.
I'm Brian Pittard.
And I'm Steve Morey.
You're going to hear Woof and an explosion. We'll be back real soon. Take care, everyone.
Woof!